Perhaps the gods are punishing them, one muttered. Or something far worse has awakened, said another. The shadow moved swiftly, slithering across the village like smoke. Who was next? Who had sinned? Kwame's breath came fast as he followed the shifting darkness. Elder Yaw sat up in bed, his eyes wide with fear. Who's there? The old man croaked. I thought no one knew. I thought it was buried forever. Kwame's breath caught. What did you do? Cold. The shadow was showing him something. Someone. Who is next? The moment Kwame stepped outside, his own shadow slid ahead of him, stretching unnaturally across the ground. It was leading him towards the river. Kwame ran, his heart thundering in his chest. The path twisted through the trees, the air growing colder with each step. Then he saw it, a small figure near the water. Kwame. He was kneeling at the river's edge, his hands gripping something buried in the mud. He was digging frantically, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Kwame. Kwame called. Stop! Kwame's head snapped up, his eyes wild with fear. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. Stay back, he shouted. You don't understand. But Kwame could see it now. The thing buried in the mud. It was a small wooden box, old and worn. Symbols covered its surface, their meaning long forgotten. Kwame's fingers dug around it desperately, and that was when Kwame saw the shadow. It loomed behind Kwame, stretching impossibly tall, flickering like a dying flame. Kwame's heart nearly stopped. It wasn't his shadow this time. It was Kwame's, and it had come for him. Kwame let out a strangled cry as the shadow wrapped around him, dragging him backward. His arms flailed, his body twisting violently. Kwame lunged forward, grabbing Kwame's arm. Hold on! Kwame's eyes were wide, filled with terror. I didn't mean to, he gasped. I only wanted to hide it. The shadow tightened. The ground beneath them seemed to ripple like water, darkness spreading. Kwame pulled with all his strength. Tell me what you did. Kwame's breath hitched. The box. I stole it from the shrine. I thought it had gold inside. I buried it so no one would know. Kwame's stomach twisted. He had disturbed something sacred, and the shadow would not forgive him. With one last scream, Kwame was yanked into the darkness, and then he was gone. The river was still. The air was silent. Only the old wooden box remained, half buried in the mud. Kwame stared at it, his chest rising and falling. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. Something ancient had been awoken, and it wasn't done yet. Kwame's hand shook as he reached for the box. The wood was damp, covered in thick mud, but beneath the dirt, he could still make out the strange carvings, symbols older than the village itself. He hesitated. Yaw's words echoed in his mind. Before it takes everyone, Kwame was gone, swallowed. The shadow had judged him, and now was waiting for the next sinner. But who would it take next? Kwame exhaled sharply and dug his fingers into the mud. He pulled the box free. The moment it left the earth, a strange whisper curled through the air, soft, almost human. His shadow flickered unnaturally. The box felt heavier than it should have been, like something inside was struggling to get out. Kwame clenched his jaw. He needed to know what this was. He turned on his heel and ran back to Yaw's hut. The old man was exactly where Kwame had left him, slumped against the wooden wall, his breath shallow. His eyes flickered open as Kwame entered. You found it. Yaw's voice was weak. Kwame nodded and held up the box. Tell me what this is. Yaw's expression changed instantly. His tired eyes filled with terror. He tried to push himself up, but his body failed him. Put it back, Yaw gasped. Bury it before it's too late. Kwame's fingers tightened around the box. It already is too late. Kwame is gone. The shadow took him. Yaw's breath hitched. Then it has begun. A heavy silence settled between them. The fire in the hut flickered, throwing long, twisted shadows across the walls. Kwame stepped closer. "Tell me, y'all, what is inside this box?" Y'all swallowed hard. His gaze locked on the carvings. "It is a curse," he whispered. "A prison for the worst of souls. Ones who could not rest, ones filled with anger and vengeance. The elders sealed them away long ago. That box was never meant to be disturbed." Kwame felt his blood run cold. "Then why did Kwesi take it?" Y'all shut his eyes. Greed. He thought it was treasure. But what he did not know was that every person who disturbs a box will be judged. Their sins will call the shadow, and the shadow will not stop until its hunger is fed. Kwame inhaled sharply. "Then who is next?" Y'all slowly turned his head, locking eyes with him. "You, Kwame." The room suddenly felt too small. The fire crackled. Kwame could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. No, it couldn't be. I didn't do anything." Kwame protested, but y'all only looked at him with sad, knowing eyes. "The shadow does not choose blindly," y'all murmured. "You have a sin, Kwame. And now, the shadow will come for you." At that moment, the fire in the hut flickered out. Darkness swallowed the room, and in the silence, Kwame heard it. A whisper. His own shadow had started to move.